Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Andy Tyndall. Here's some quick show highlights. If you've ever wanted to be a better communicator, this may be the episode for you. Today, we get to hear a fantastic story from Staff Sergeant Eric Maddox, who was the mastermind interrogator who collected the information back in 2003 that ultimately led to the capture of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Now, Eric talks about the behind the scenes of that particular story. He highlights some of the information from his book, Mission Blacklist #1, but he specifically goes into what he calls empathy-based listening techniques, which he uses to really get us as human beings to listen to each other at a much higher level. I hope you get to listen to all the great information that he provides today. Hey folks, welcome to the Human Side of Greatness podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tyndall. We've got such a impressive, impactful episode today, all about listening. You know, in the world today, there's so many different conflicts, so many different issues around trust, so many different issues around building relationships that can simply be resolved by having better listening skills. So today, we will hear from our special guest, who is really credited with reshaping the Army's techniques on interrogation. And it all starts out with our guest, who was at one point attached to a Delta Force team in Iraq back in 2003, when they were tasked with finding the world's most wanted individual at that point in time, Saddam Hussein. This particular guest has conducted the most interrogations in U.S. Army history, and it is a pleasure to welcome Staff Sergeant Eric Maddox to our show.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks for being here, Eric. Really appreciate it. Great to see you, my friend. So at the top of every show, we kick off with some just real different questions, some unique questions. And, you know, knowing your background for the time I've known you, you know, some questions come to mind in terms of travel. So if you had the opportunity to travel, and the options were a road trip with family or the first flight to Mars, which would you pick and why?
No brainer. First of all, I probably wouldn't get on the flight to Mars. And I love road trips with family. It's that very isolated time where you're with your family, the people you love. And what I found is there's no better opportunity to communicate and really get even closer connection with your kids than on a road trip. So for me, road trips are everything. I don't have any desire to go to Mars. Maybe it's awesome. I kind of attribute places I love to go with the people that are there. The stuff around it, it's fine, but I'm into relationships and communication. So that's the easiest question you'll ever ask me.
Wow. Okay. So if we are shifting gears and talking about sports,
okay,
what's your favorite sport to watch, and what's your favorite sport to play?
So my favorite sport to watch is one of my daughter's soccer matches, right? Because I love the way they play. I really think soccer's exciting, always action-packed. I am an Oklahoma Sooner, so Oklahoma Sooner football, it's the most stressful sports to watch, absolutely. To play, I love to run. I love the endorphins that get fired off when you jog, get out. It's what helps me think the best. I feel like I'm a naturally good runner. So the longer, the better. Training right now for a half marathon. So I love to jog, run, walk, hike, anything where you're moving. Outside, like to see the world. Yeah.
Man, okay, that one was actually a surprising answer for the time that we've known each other and whatnot. So really really interesting. So yes, you are the interrogator, dude. You're the guy who is credited with capturing all the information to ultimately lead to the capture of Saddam Hussein. But what I did not mention at the top of the show was throughout that process, you created this technique, which you call empathy-based listening techniques, which has effectively changed the way I operate in my life over time. I thought I was a pretty good listener, but your techniques took me to a different level. And so I can't wait for our listeners to hear that portion or the creativity that came out of a conflict, which was over there in Iraq at that point in time. So, with your background, how did you get rolling with the Army and that sort of thing? Did you come from a military background? Was your family in there?
I did not. I did not have family in the military. My grandfather fought in World War II. He was drafted. So, military wasn't a huge part of my family background. I felt I had a calling when I was going into my senior year at the University of Oklahoma. And I did graduate. I finished out, graduated OU, and immediately enlisted in the United States Army. I enlisted to be an infantry grunt. I loved it, right? 82nd Airborne Division, jumping out of airplanes. I went and I graduated Ranger School. But I was really intrigued by the foreign language program that the United States military had. I took the test. I qualified for Chinese Mandarin. And they said, oh, by the way, you got to have an actual MOS, military occupational specialty.
Okay.
And they said, just go be an interrogator. You'll never actually do them. So they trained me 8 weeks of interrogations, taught me in Chinese Mandarin for 16 months. And I never expected I would actually ever do interrogations.
So you get trained as a Chinese Mandarin linguist. They tell you, hey, bro, you're probably never going to do interrogations, so don't worry about it. How did you apply that skill? like where was the application of being a Chinese Mandarin linguist?
Oh, it's a great question. So you don't really know when you're learning Chinese how the military is going to use you. But once you graduate, they first sent me, and I worked at the embassy in Beijing. I was kind of a translator for the military attaché in Beijing. And then they had me working as an intelligence collection officer for the United States military against China. I was on the West Coast. I would do interviews of Chinese scientists and researchers. Now, and all was going well. And then 9/11 occurs, and we go to war in Afghanistan. And they said, no, you're never going to leave your Chinese role. They would use other interrogators that were trained in those particular languages. Then we go to war in Iraq, and they said, no, you're never going to go, Eric. You're a Chinese Mandarin specialist. And 3 months into the war in Iraq, I get these highly unexpected top secret orders to go to Baghdad. And when I get there, I learned that Saddam Hussein, the ace of spades, was the primary target for the Joint Special Operations Command. That's the United States military task force responsible for tracking down the most wanted people in the world. They did not have interrogators. They had a small group that was kind of working as interrogators, but they didn't actually have interrogators out with the Delta Force teams out on the ground. And there was this one Delta Force team out in Saddam's hometown of Tikrit that kept telling this team of interrogators, hey, we need one of y'all to come out here with us. You need to come out. We need one of you. They're like, we're not infantry. And they called the Army and said, give us a list of every single Army interrogator who's former infantry. And, oh, by the way, it'd be great if they graduated Ranger School.
Ding, ding, ding.
They said, Eric, you're the only name on that list.
You're the guy.
So that's how I began my first battlefield deployment.
And so at that point, experience, I mean, there wasn't like 20 years of interrogation experience or anything to that effect. How nervous were you, man?
Oh, my nerves probably peaked out when they said you're going to Iraq, right? I was a Chinese specialist. I knew everything about China and their military and the language. I mean, it took me it took me kind of a minute to find where Iraq was exactly on the globe, right? I knew kind of where it was, and I knew Saddam, and I thought those deck of cards, I followed it like everyone else did. I was not ready to go over there, and I'd never done an interrogation before, Andy. So when I get there, I'm like, just don't look stupid, don't get anybody killed, and don't get fired. Just whatever you do, if you finish this tour, you are mission success. Well, I'm not saying I set a low bar, but realistically, I didn't know what the heck I was going to be doing over there.
Dude, that is like, so unique to see someone be able to just say, hey, you know what? It was new, it was different. And I was not really, sure about everything and how it was going to work out. So, folks, I got to pause for 1 second and let you know that Eric chronicles his entire time in Iraq in a very well-written book called Mission Blacklist #1, where he actually goes through his entire journey of his time leading up to the capture of Saddam Hussein. And so he's kind enough to share some of the snippets and some of the highlights of that entire journey with us today. So I'm really just getting to peel back. We're really getting to peel back some of the additional layers of the onion, so to speak. So you're there. You're with this Delta Force team. How did the first couple weeks, months of the mission go for you?
So when I first get to the Delta Force team in Saddam's hometown at Tikrit, it's this little team, right? There's like 8 Delta Force operators. They have their own house on the U.S. compound. So I'm living with them, and I'm nervous. I don't want to say anything stupid. Well, first moments I'm with them, like within the first couple hours, we're out going on a raid, like a real live, no kidding, blow down the front door, shoot them up, bang them up raid. And I go inside and they're like, all right, interrogate everyone in the house. I'm like, oh my goodness, because they don't teach interrogators how to do interrogations on a raid site. And you only have a few minutes. The first guy that I interrogated, he opened up an AK-47. He shot at the soldiers coming in, and they did not kill him, which was fantastic, but they butt stroked him with one of their weapons.
Okay.
Andy, his eye was not in his head anymore. I mean, he had a bandage over his face. He's missing an eye. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I didn't know that. And I'm like, hey, take off his handkerchief. I want to talk to him. And he's bleeding.
Dude, that's a rough start. Like, for that to be your first deal, that's a rough start.
Right.
So you proceed to interrogate this guy on the spot in his home, gun butted. Wow. Okay. So did that set the standard? So that's the first couple. I would say that's your first real interrogation in the first couple of months. So you're telling me that's how it all kicked off?
First couple of days.
Wow. Okay. So was that how you anticipated it going forward?
I didn't know, Andy. The next day, the Delta Force team tells me there's a U.S. military prison. They've got prisoners down there. Go get a couple of prisoners, come back here and do kind of normal interrogations in a room, sitting down. So that's kind of where I would consider actual using what I had been trained. I sat down with the prisoner, and Andy, it's pretty quickly that I realized what I was trained on will not work. So we are trained that you're going to interrogate a prisoner that's from the enemy government's military, smoking gun, uniform. We're fighting an insurgency. These individuals are wearing civilian clothes. We didn't have any information on them. They probably knew we didn't have any information. And the techniques of persuasion and influence and telling them You've got to trust me because I know what's best for you. They weren't going to work. So the first couple of days, I was spending all these hours using the Army techniques, but I quickly realized this isn't going to work. I don't know what to do, but I've got to figure this out. I'm not going to sit here and just use ineffective techniques. So, Andy, my first real sort of creative approach was, let's see how long I can keep an individual willingly talking to me. And it was, what you'd imagine on a movie, kind of having conversations about their life and friends and family. But then it evolved, Andy. It was like, all right, I'm seeing that these men still don't trust me. They will talk, but they don't trust me. And I noticed there were times when they would want to be more transparent, more open. And I started to understand it's my mindset. When I'm talking to somebody absent of my distractions, my goals, my agendas, my objectives, and mainly my biases, that's when they would be more transparent. Again, it wasn't to the point of complete cooperation. This was not yet empathy-based listening, but it gave me that little bit of hope that said, there's something about communications that's not about persuasion. It's more about listening. That was kind of the beginning.
Okay. Wow. So the phrase that I got right there, you said, I started to understand. What were the little cues that you started to understand as you were talking with these folks, these individuals who did not look like regular military personnel? What were the little things that you started to understand?
I started to realize when people want to be engaged, it's because they feel like you're talking to them for them and from their perspective, and not directing to them to persuade them toward your perspective, your goals, right? That was the first thing I realized. I'm like, wait, it's very clear when I'm doing this is because they want to engage. They'll kind of cut you off. They'll stop you in mid-sentence. They'll say, well, no, here's what I was at. Here's more. I'm like, oh my goodness. I was fighting to persuade this person to be engaged. And now they're cutting me off because now they feel like I am listening to them. I couldn't figure out what to listen for. And I learned really quickly. I'm like, oh my goodness, when I can put these distractions behind me, I was really good at telling when someone was lying. I could kind of piece their puzzle together. And I'm talking to this prisoner and he says, Eric, you got to let me go. I said, I can't let you go. And I said, but I'll make a deal. If you don't lie to me, we talk and you don't lie, you walk out that door. But if you lie, you stay forever. He said, deal. I listened to him. I caught him in some lies. And Andy, I looked at him and I said, how many brothers do you have? He said, Eric, I told you I have 3. I said, you have 4. So right? His jaw drops and he's in shock and he's kind of shaking. And I said, what was the deal we just cut? And he looks at me and he said, can we cut a new deal? I said, yeah, here's the new deal. You're going to tell me everything you know. And Andy, this was the critical moment. He looks at me and he said, Eric, I can't. Because you don't get me. And you don't want to get me. And I thought, he's right. I may be putting my world, my distractions behind me, but I'm still listening for me. I was listening to capture him in lies to gain power and control.
Okay.
And I said, what if I use this ability to remove distractions and listen for him? I don't even know if I can do it. I don't even know if we can do that. But during that conversation, I said, Eric, it's about him. Listen to him. Try to figure out, try to solve his problems. And it wasn't that by listening for his problems, I then was listening for the right stuff. It was this demonstration when you can show someone, I am absolutely an advocate for you. It empowers them and they unload. It's like the world is dying for people to actually what I call walk on their stage, not make it about your movie, but walk onto their stage. And when you do it, it empowers them. And they say, Eric, here's how I need your help. It was awesome, right? This prisoner said, Eric, that fourth brother, the one I didn't want to tell you about, he's in the insurgency. And the prisoner said, I'd like to take you to his bosses, the people that made him get involved. The prisoner said, but they'll know it was me, Eric. They're going to kill my family. That puts my entire tribe's lives in danger. And I thought, that's what matters. This prisoner doesn't care about this war. He doesn't care about Saddam. At this moment in time, this person's worried about his family. And then what does that mean? The prisoner said, but Eric, what if I take you to these prisoners over across town? These bad guys, these insurgents. He said, Eric, if you'll have your men go there and then from their house, go to my brother's bosses, they'll never know it was me. And I'm like, that's what it means to empower someone. I mean, I was spending all this time saying, you should do this. Saddam's bad. The United States is here to help. We're going to help you. I can do this. I can protect you. And he says, you don't know what protection means. You don't know what my life means. And then when you listen, it empowers them to go, here's the details. And that's what the world wants. So I'm like, can I funnel this? Can I make this such an efficient process? And it resulted in 300 interrogations and directly taken to the exact location of Saddam by the one man he trusted to never give up his location. It was a bodyguard. And I interrogated that bodyguard. It took me 1 hour and 45 minutes. In 1 hour and 45 minutes, he says, Eric, we got to go. We got to go right now.
So two things here. That prisoner became an advocate and opened up this lane of recreating the process of interrogations for Eric as well as for the U.S. military, it sounds like. Is that correct?
I would say the 300 prisoners. That hour and 45 minutes with that prisoner, that was sort of the result of understanding this process. Okay. And seeing, hey, let me show you what this looks like with that last prisoner.
Interesting. So you mentioned Saddam's bodyguard. Take us through the story. I mean, you lay it out really well in the book, but take us through the story of the raids, all the stuff that leads up to getting to Saddam's bodyguard and ultimately capturing Saddam. How do you find him?
So with that first kind of breakthrough prisoner, the Delta Force commander I was with, his name was Bam Bam. Bam Bam said, hey, we'll give this a shot. And that prisoner took us to some targets, and that resulted in more prisoners. And I said, okay, watch this process of building trust by walking on their stage, right? Once the team understood, we're going to have to collaborate. We're going to have to work. We're going to have to understand the enemy. But the result of it is going to take us up the insurgency. We started working as a team. We have some of the prisoners actually live with us. We wouldn't put them in the system. We released many prisoners. They became our informants. We did anything we could to empower them so that they could help us. They laid out the insurgency. We created a link diagram that had over 2,000 names on it. And we started to realize from these prisoners, there is one guy who knows the location of Saddam, and it's this bodyguard. This bodyguard was key. I'm on a 5.5-month tour. They yanked me from the Chinese Mandarin mission. They said, you have Eric for 5.5 months. My tour's running out. Every mission, every raid is to capture this bodyguard. We couldn't find him, Andy. I mean, we were going from house to house to his friends, to his relatives, to his business partners. And every time we thought we were going to get him, he wasn't there.
No luck.
But every time we got closer to him, the prisoner, the new people that we captured, they could give me more information, more explanation. And with a couple of days to go on my tour, we captured the bodyguard's son. It was an 18-year-old son. And when I started talking to him, he said, Eric, my dad, the bodyguard, was at this house you captured me at 2 hours ago. He left. How would I know where he went? And at that point, I said, how would anybody know where he went now? He knows we're after him. We pushed him. Nobody knows where he is. But this boy will have something. If you earn his trust and you build his trust, and I started talking to this 18-year-old, we connected. It was like, Andy, we like way too connected because the bodyguard's son, 18-year-old, he starts crying. He's like laying on the couch. It was like a counseling session, right? Like a family counseling session. And he talks to me, but he starts talking about he wishes he and his dad could go fishing like they did when they were younger. I said, where'd you go fishing? He said, no, Eric, they still go fishing. They just don't take me. I said, where? He said, along the Tigris River. They built this fish pond next to the river. Okay. Now, Andy, earlier months before this, I'd interrogated Saddam Hussein's cook. I cooked every meal for Saddam for 8 straight years.
The cook,
the chef. And the chef said, Eric, being Saddam's chef's pretty easy job. He loves this one dish. It's a fish dish called mazgoof. Chef said, I make the best mazgoof in the world, Eric. I'm Saddam's cook. Andy, the boy, told me that his dad, the bodyguard, and his buddies built a fish pond next to a river. Why are you going to build a fish pond during the middle of a war unless you need to have that pond stocked for your brutal dictator boss because you cannot go to the market and buy fish? So with just hours to go, we raided a fish pond. And I thought, absolutely, they had built this shack. We captured 2 men in there. I said, it's going to be the bodyguard. And it wasn't. It was these 2 fishermen, right? My tour's up. Bam, bam, says, Eric, I think you can get me one more target, but you're leaving they're sending you to Baghdad. Take any of these prisoners that we are living with us, that we have this trust with. Take these 2 fishermen. Go get me one more target. So I'm leaving. I'm going to Baghdad. I'm out processing. But I had a couple of days before I was going to leave the country, and I started with the fishermen. And again, I can't have an agenda. I don't know who these fishermen are, but I listened to them. I walked on their stage. One opens up and he says, Eric, I'm not just a fisherman. I'm a distant cousin of the bodyguard.
There you go.
And a couple of days ago, the bodyguard came and got the address of our mutual aunt and uncle in Baghdad. I think he's scared of you all in Tikrit. You've gotten too close. He's gone to Baghdad. And I'm like, awesome. We're in Baghdad. I begged and pleaded for the Delta Force commander, the Bam Bam of Baghdad, to go on that next raid of this mutual aunt and uncle of the bodyguard, one of these fishermen. And I'm leaving the country on December 13th, 2003 at 8 o'clock in the morning. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the Bam Bam of Baghdad calls in and said, Eric, we did that raid. We had a slow night. We didn't find your bodyguard. And I'm done, right? That's it. I mean, it's over. I'm getting ready to leave. I've got to get ready for the manifest. But they brought those prisoners in from that house in Baghdad at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I said, you can still do this. You can connect. You can get something. I brought in the homeowner, Andy. I listened to him at a higher level than he'd ever been listened to in his entire life. And he opens up and he said, Eric, I work for the bodyguard. I'm actually the deputy of the bodyguard. I mean, you're talking about a 2,000 name link diagram. And he says, I'm number 2. And I'm like, that's awesome. I looked at him and I said, I need you to take me to that bodyguard. In my mind, I'm thinking, if you could do it the next 15 minutes, that would be great. And this deputy looks at me and he said, Eric, last night, when you captured me at that house, he said the bodyguard was asleep in the bed next to me.
So you got him. He was there.
He wasn't there. The Delta Force team said he wasn't there. But I was like, this is Delta Force. They don't miss anybody. Did they get him? Right? And I go to the guards. I start lifting up hoods. I knew what my bodyguard was supposed to look like. My bodyguard was supposed to have that John Travolta chin. And I didn't get the hood off. I saw the chin. I knew I had my guy. I finally had the bodyguard.
So it ends up being a success in the 11th hour, so to speak.
Well, we're not a success yet. Nobody cared about capturing that bodyguard. That bodyguard knew the location of Saddam. That bodyguard was the one guy Saddam trusted to never, ever give up his location. Saddam Hussein had a strategy. He said, everybody on the deck of cards, get the heck out of Tikrit. You're going to draw attention to me. Saddam said, all you bodyguards that have worked for me, get out of here. There's one man I trust, and that's this bodyguard. And all the other insurgents, they did not know where Saddam was. All the information led to this one bodyguard. He's the only one that knew Saddam's location.
And so this guy is, say his name again,
Mohammed Ibrahim. He's the bodyguard. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I have less than 2 hours. And I got to get his cooperation. And I told myself, you're not going to change things now just because you're short on time. You're going to listen to him. You're going to connect with him. You're going to solve his problems. He'll solve all yours. And Andy, I did. I just go in there and I told him, unfortunately, the only thing that we're going to be able to talk about is the exact location of Saddam. I didn't know what was coming out of his mouth because it doesn't matter. With this process, it doesn't matter what you think. It only matters what they care about. I didn't know what he was going to say, but I said, if you'll listen to it, he'll tell you what he needs. And he looks at me and he said, you give me way too much credit. He said, Saddam? The president? He said, I don't know where he is. And I knew.
Trying to fake you out.
I didn't matter. Of course he's going to fake me out. I shouldn't be surprised he's trying to fake me out, Andy. What he said was what mattered. You give me way too much credit. I said, well, I didn't give you any credit. I said, I didn't know who you were when I got to this country. I said, but the 300 prisoners that I've interrogated, see, the 40 of your family members that he forced you to get involved in this insurgency that I have in this prison right now, they give you credit. They give you credit for ruining their lives. And he kind of rolls his eyes. Andy, he wasn't rolling his eyes at me. He was rolling his eyes at Saddam. He blamed now Saddam. He knew the reason his family was destroyed and these adult grown men lives were ruined because Saddam forced him to be the one man.
It's terrible.
And I had learned that this bodyguard had a 3-month-old baby living right within a kilometer of the base of our compound in this town of Tikrit.
Super close.
We could have walked there. And I told him, I said, your wife had a baby 3 months ago. That baby's living at this house. He was shocked. He didn't know I knew about the baby. He didn't know I knew about the location. I said, where else would you go to find someone than their spouse? I said, but I never had the soldiers raid that house. I knew your wife was there. I said, but I'd never send those soldiers there. That baby would never survive that raid. I said, I'd never put that baby's life ahead of capturing Saddam. And I said, what will he do for you now? What will he do for that baby? And he just started tearing. Tears started running down his eyes.
Just bawl him. You got him where it mattered. Whew.
That's all that matters is where it matters. But I've trained thousands of people, hundreds of interrogators. And I always say, okay, you have the bodyguard. Where do you begin? And they say, I need him to know he can end this war. I need him to realize what a brutal dictator Saddam was, and he can end this brutal dictatorship. I need him to know he'll be the friend of the Americans, and we can give him $25 million. And I'm like, he doesn't care. That's what you think matters. It doesn't matter what we think. It matters what they think.
They think, yeah.
The key is that we can learn to listen, to identify what matters to anyone we talk to, what matters with anyone we have a relationship, but most importantly, what matters to the people we partner with. Because in a partnership, people share resources. They're bonded. It says, I'm going to give you a little bit, you're going to give me a little bit, and we're going to take this partnership and increase value. Or they want to know if we partner, Are you going to increase it for your value first and then me? Are you actually coming over to my stage, my movie, and you're seeking to improve me first? That's what the world wants to know.
Man. So then you got him, and he knows that you know about his family, location, the baby, the whole deal. What does he do?
Well, I want to be perfectly clear. He didn't think I knew about his location of his baby, and if he doesn't give me Saddam, I'm going to go get that baby. No. He just knew I've taken care of that baby. My mission is to find Saddam, but I'm not going to do it at all costs. And what matters to him the most, I avoided. I didn't have to. Now, if we go get Saddam Hussein, if he gives his most valuable resource, which is the exact location of Saddam, am I going to take care of him? He can at least admit it, right? He could at least say, if I do know where he is, what are we going to do, right? And he kind of looks at me and he said, I don't know if I should do it. And he didn't say, couldn't do it. He said, I don't know if I should do it. And again, I'm sitting there going, oh, I think you should. I do. But my time's out.
I think you should.
My time is running out. The interrogators come in and they're like, what are you doing? It's 7:45. You got to go. And I got up the bodyguard and I started walking with him. And I said, this is not a joke. I'm not pulling a ruse on you. I'm leaving. And the reason I'm leaving is because they don't think he's up there. If they knew he was up there, you think I'd be leaving? Nobody knows he's up there but you and me. Problem is, nobody's going to believe you. But they'll believe me. I need it now. He said, I got to think. I just got to think. I need a few minutes. And I said, I don't have any minutes. I said, I need it now. He said, I can't. And I put him in his cell and I said, you're never going to see me. I'm leaving. Because they don't know he's up there. And you're going to change your mind. And when you do, you have to prove to them that he's up there. And I said, but you first got to get them to even talk to you. And I said, when you're in here, when you change your mind, I said, go crazy. I said, you need to go so crazy that the guards actually have to come talk to you because no one's going to talk to you again. I said, go nuts when you're going to give us Saddam. And I put him in his cell and I left. I went and packed my bags. They're right. I mean, I am driving to the tarmac. I am leaving. And the senior interrogator kind of looks at me and he said, hey, what'd you do with that? What'd you do to that prisoner from Tikrit? I said, I didn't do anything to him. Why? He said, the guards are going nuts. They think he's trying to kill himself. He won't stop yelling and screaming and banging his head against the wall of his cell.
He's just trying to get their attention.
And he was getting their attention. I jumped out of the truck, ran to the prison, got the bodyguard out, sat him down and said, where is he? Man, he looked at me and he said, Eric, we got to go. We got to go right now. He said, Saddam's in this little village called Adwar, just south of Tikrit at the farmhouse of a man named Kaish named Jassim. We drew the sketch. We drew the map. I went outside. The interrogators are back. And I said, my man just broke. Saddam's in Tikrit. And they said, no, he's not. We've done thousands of raids. We don't know where he is. We know he didn't stay up in his hometown of Tikrit. And I said, you don't understand. And they said, you don't understand. Go get on the plane. And I said, please call Bam Bam. Tell him I got the bodyguard. And he's dying to take him to Saddam. And they looked at me like I was nuts. And I gave them the sketch and the map. They flew me across the tarmac to my flight. And I left the country. I left, Andy. And good thing that when you're with this task force, you don't just go home. Okay. You've got to go to Doha, Qatar, the Joint Special Operations headquarters. You've got to give a top secret out briefing just to go back to the United States. So the next morning I show up for my out briefing. They knock on the door and a senior officer kind of pokes his head out. He said, all briefings today have been canceled. Clunk.
What are you doing here?
Sergeant knocks on the door and he says, Staff Sergeant Maddox cannot leave the country until he gives his briefing. And the senior officer looks at me and he pulls me inside and he said, you're Eric Maddox? I said, yes. He said, Eric, all briefings are canceled because we got him. Your bodyguard did it. And I said, how did it go down? He said, when you left, we called Bam Bam. And Bam Bam, the entire Delta Force team got on a helicopter, flew to Baghdad, picked up the bodyguard, went back to the house, planned and executed the raid of that farmhouse of Qais Namek Jassim. Andy, they couldn't find Saddam. They looked for an hour. Bam Bam goes to the truck, pulls the bodyguard out, and he says, where is he? Bodyguard's horrified, will not say a word. He's nervous. He has to hold one of the Delta Force operators' hands. He walks the team around the backside of this farmhouse, a farmhouse that the Army had told Bam Bam, Bam Bam, we've been to this farmhouse. We've been to every farmhouse in the Sunni Triangle twice. Bodyguard walks around the backside of the house, turns to the team, doesn't say anything, still staring at him, and he starts kicking his feet frantically. And they found a rope. He was kicking up a rope, and they moved him aside and they started digging. This rope was connected to a lid. They cleared it off. They had their weapons drawn. They looked at the bodyguard, and he's standing there looking at him going. They reached down, they lifted it up, and they were staring at him. Saddam Hussein. Oh. Pinpointed by the one guy he trusted to never give up his location. And that guy cooperated in less than 2 hours.
Eric, I mean, that is like mind blowing that in less than 2 hours, in less than 2 hours, the dude, the Ace of Spades, is captured by someone who he placed his trust into because they placed their trust into the interrogator, Eric Maddox. So
Andy, can I say something on that before you go forward?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
This is the critical element of everything that I've learned. I've done more interrogations than any other interrogator in the history of the United States government.
What's the actual number? Just remind me.
2,700. Okay, boom. 2,700 prisoners from 25 different countries. I've done 8 deployments. What I've learned is this. When I talk about that analogy of trust, we all are the lead in our own movies. We're all alone on our own stage. I say you got to walk off your stage and walk on theirs. This bodyguard loved, adored, and trusted Saddam, but Saddam always kept the bodyguard on Saddam's stage. All of us, we're selfish, we're self-centered. We want to live on our stage. Everything that matters on our movie. Saddam was about control, pulling this bodyguard and controlling him. Everything to Saddam was about Saddam's movie. And this individual was supposed to be an actor in Saddam's movie. What did I do? I walked off of my stage onto the bodyguards. There's a different level of trust.
You helped him produce a whole new movie, bro.
It's the movie he wants to star in. It's called The Muhammad Ibrahim Life. Every person on this call, every person that we will ever interact with, they are the lead in their movie. Yeah. That's all that matters. Yeah. The question is, do we want to be the lead in our movie on our stage by ourselves? Or do we want to be the world's greatest supporting actor? That's it. When you walk on someone's stage, you're such a rarity, they're never going to let you go. You're not replaceable. That means, what do? They keep you. There's margins. There's your leverage. Our kind of statement for my company, maximum positive impact. That's influence. You're never going to influence anybody by dragging them and forcing them to be in your movie. But if you become the rarity and become the world's greatest supporting actor, you have all the influence in the world. You give up control to gain the influence.
So just to pause right there for a second, we usually do this pretty early on the top of the show, but you mentioned your company, and obviously you're author with a great book, great story there. You're also a keynote speaker, whether it be virtual or especially on stage, where you do a lot of great work. In addition to that, professional business coach, but also professional negotiator. Where can the folks that are listening or watching get a hold of Eric Maddox if they want to?
Go to my website, I keep it really simple. It's ericmaddox.com.
Very, very simple.
Right?
Very simple. Very
I
simple.
mean, listen, I got to keep things simple in my mind.
Very simple.
ericmaddox.com. I love doing events. If you want to do a company event to help unify a culture, are we service minded? Do we put our clients ahead of ourselves? But my passion, it's helping people with negotiations. I mean, if somebody's coming up on a big deal, give me a call. I promise. I'll help you win and we'll win big. It's what I love to do. The key to any negotiation, we have to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of the person on the other side of the table. That is what empathy-based listening is. I see its effectiveness. And sometimes there's negotiations where the parties are not going to be able to collaborate. There won't be teamwork, and the necessity to gather the most critical components of the intelligence, analyze it, and then control the communication to where you're building your leverage and you're marginalizing your susceptibility to their leverage. It is my favorite thing to do.
That's super, super impactful, and hope everyone can go and check out some of Eric's content on the website and what all the great things he's doing with his organization. Hey folks, thanks for listening. Please check out part 2 of our great discussion with Eric Maddox.